Hello everyone. Welcome to A3 Market Analysis, the next step in the design cycle as we continue our mission to Mars. Today in the design cycle, we're going to be doing some research into products that already exist. In the A3 Market Analysis, it actually asks you to look out into the market to see what products people have already come up with or what solutions have already existed for problems that you're looking towards. So one of our problems that we're looking at is, how do we move things from one place to another quickly, efficiently, and safely, right? And the answer to that is, you're right, transportation vehicles. Whether we've got to get something halfway across the world overnight, in fact, we'd use a plane, or we need to get something between our two islands, maybe a boat, or we just need to go pick something up at the grocery store, car, bicycle, skateboard. There are a variety of different transportation vehicles out there for us to choose from. Each one is better at fulfilling a different role than others. You wouldn't use your family's car to try and, say, take 2,000 different cases of Dr. Pepper from the storage warehouse in Sand Island to your home. No, you'd use an 18-wheeler that has the capacity to store and hold and carry that much type of weight.
If you aren't familiar with them, this is a good time.
You probably wouldn't use an 18-wheeler. Conversely, you wouldn't use an 18-wheeler if you were just trying to get to.
Today we're going to be learning about the chassis,
the store to pick up one case of Dr. Pepper.
A bit about propulsion.
Yeah. Okay. So I like Dr. Pepper, but aside that,
chassis.
Depending on the type
is the
of
underpart of the vehicle. Some people call it the undercarriage. It consists of a frame on which the body and all the different other parts are mounted.
Talking planes,
all the
we're not talking boats.
The axles,
they have some very
engine,
similar properties.
The seats,
that have developed.
All of that is mounted on top of
thousands
the chassis.
Of years.
It has to be
goods
really strong. Because it's
so we're going to take a moment to look at some of those features of different transportation vehicles,
in our
so
case,
that you have some language
and the things that we bring
comes time for you
from different places
look
with
at
us.
Some
The
prototypes.
chassis has to have something called structural integrity.
Some of the main
means
features.
It has to be strong enough to be able to hold all of the things together and still be functional and allow everything to be able to move around. One thing you'll need to do with your prototype is to make sure that it also has structural integrity, which means it doesn't fall apart when you use it, and it doesn't fall apart when you get your propulsion system in place. The axle is actually a really important piece of equipment. It is like a rod or a bar that connects two wheels together that hold them parallel to each other. In today's modern vehicles, you usually have an axle in the front and the back of your car connecting your front wheels and your back wheels. Another important part of the axle is the fact that on our modern transportation vehicles, the axle is what is actually causing the wheels to turn. Each of the wheels is attached to the axle, and as the axle turns, so does the wheels. Sometimes we have cars that are two-wheel drive, sometimes we have cars that are four-wheel drive, or 18-wheelers that might actually have 6 wheels or 8 wheels that drive. But each of those corresponding pairs of wheels is connected to an axle. Sometimes axles are called free wheels or free axles. They're not actually connected to the powertrain or connected to anything that powers the axle to spin. They just spin as they move along. You'll have to decide which of your axles is going to be powered, and if you're going to have four-wheel drive or if you're going to have a two-wheel drive vehicle with a free wheel or free axle at some point. So let's talk about wheels. As you know, wheels are one of the greatest inventions of all time. When man created the wheel, he created the ability to move. Wheels obviously have a very specific shape to them, and that shape is, you're right, they're round. And what's great about a wheel being round is the fact that the entire surface of the wheel, or the entire round surface of the wheel, only a small part of it actually touches the ground at any time. And what's great about that is it reduces the amount of friction between the ground and the car. And because it's round, it can roll very easily and change the surface touching area between the wheel and the ground to make it be able to roll and move, reducing the amount of friction that it takes. Yeah. Now you'll notice this is a modern wheel from a modern car, and you can see the spokes of the hubs that go out from the axle to the outside of the wheel frame, holding that shape of the wheel in place. We have really strong materials in this metal solid steel holding the wheel in place, right? Sometimes, though, you might see different designs on different types of spokes or axles. For example, you'll notice in this wheeled vehicle, the spokes are very different, and there's a reason for it. On a car, because it's carrying so much weight with the engine inside and the people inside and all the stuff we want to carry and the seats and so forth, you need to make sure that you have spokes that are really, really strong. Whereas on a bicycle, you don't need spokes that are that strong because it's generally not going to carry that much weight. So there are a lot more spokes and they're a lot thinner. They're probably using some type of a graphite. Notice although the wheel is much larger, much thinner. It actually is thinner for a reason. Not only does it reduce the amount of weight, but it also gives it more mobility. You'd want to have more mobility in a bike because you need to be able to turn faster or get in and out of other places faster. Here is one more type of wheel. This is a wheel from a train. As you can see, the spoke on this wheel, well, where is the spoke? Turns out it's one giant spoke that is really big and really solid and really metal. It has to be that way because it carries a ton of weight. You'll also notice something different between this wheel and the two wheels I showed you before. On those other two wheels, there was something around the outside of the wheel that allowed for some type of grip. Notice this wheel has it, and this wheel has it too. We call those tires. Why do you need tires? Well, because we want to make sure that we've got grip on the road or traction. Whereas on a wheel like this, on a train, do you need traction? Not so much, because you won't be doing very much turning. In fact, you don't even decide the direction by steering a train. It steers itself based on the tracks or the rails on the ground. So you don't necessarily need traction here. What you want is you want as least amount of friction as possible because you want these to be able to go for great distances without having to consume a ton of energy. Speaking of energy, something has to propulse your vehicle, and so let's talk a little bit about propulsion. The energy to move an object can come from a variety of different ways. It can come from things like gravity. It could come from things like chemical explosions when the gasoline inside the modern day engine explodes. Or if you've got a car that runs off of an electric battery, like a Tesla, then it actually uses a different form of electric energy to be able to move the motor, to be able to move the axle, to be able to move the wheels. But you can't use a motor or chemical reactions, and you can't use wind. So what are you going to use? Well, just know there are still materials out there that you can use that can store potential energy and then release it as kinetic energy. If you're looking at the screen, there are a couple of hints on here, and you might even learn in class today how we can take the elastic properties of some of these products and be able to store energy in them and then release them. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, let's go take a look at some of those prototypes.
Welcome back. So now you know about transportation vehicles and some of their most common characteristics and features, what make them work really well for getting across land. Some of them work well on flat surfaces, some of them work well going off-road and into uneven terrain. Our Mars Rover prototype actually has to cover some of the weirdest terrain out there. It's got to go over the rocks and the dust and the pit and the dirt that is Mars. And so when we build our prototype, we need to keep that in mind. We also have to keep in mind that you've been given a specific challenge of how you're going to power your vehicle. If you remember, I said that it had to be self-powered. Not only that, but it had to be able to store potential energy and then release that potential energy as kinetic energy. Hopefully you know a little bit about the forms of energy. If you don't, I've got some great books on that. There's plenty of awesome videos out there. In addition to that, I've also given you some things that you can't use. You can't use motors, you can't use wind power, and you can't use chemical power. So, how are you going to do it? Well, I bet if you look closely at some of the prototypes I'm going to show you today, you might be able to figure out. So, let's take a look at some prototypes.
You'll notice some students create their Mars rovers to be aesthetic, to look beautiful. Sometimes, in trying to make it that way, they might try and make their Mars rover look realistic, like a real vehicle, or they might try and make it look like a spaceship, futuristic, or they might just want to make it look cute. They're focused on making it look nice. Some students focus on trying to make sure that their prototypes are built to be as simple as possible. Maybe they're going for a lightweight prototype, or one where they can guarantee that it's not going to have a lot of extra weight on it. They might use really thin, lightweight materials, or like boxes or plastic that have already been made. Some students decide that they're going to go for something a little bit bigger, a little bit more sure, maybe a little bit more blocky, built out of cardboard, and those are totally appropriate. Look at the size of those wheels. You'll notice each of these different rovers has different features or characteristics. You'll notice a lot of hooks in there. You'll probably notice some rubber bands attached to things. And you might even notice that some students paint their wheels or make ridges on their wheels in different ways. Or some students use CDs for their wheels, which are nice and light and thin. You might notice that some students have created special areas for storage, whether it's in the back or maybe hidden inside some type of a container or contraption. There are lots of different features and characteristics you're going to want to pay attention to and maybe replicate in your rover. And there you have it. In class, you're going to be working on your own copy of the market analysis document. You're going to be given an opportunity to look at, touch, and try out some of the different rovers that other students have created in the past, and look specifically for the features and characteristics of those rovers that you think you might consider using in your potential rover design. Now, you're going to have to be careful with the rovers because they're built by students, and some of them were built a long time ago, so please be gentle and be descriptive. So in your document, you're going to have plenty of time to look at these rovers and see what you like about them, and then tell me why you think a feature is special, what you think it does, and how you think it can help a rover be successful. You'll have all of class to work on this. Good luck.